2 years ago, Sir Ken Robinson wrote this little book, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything. And roughly around the same time, Amy Novotny wrote a major piece in this magazine of the American Psychological Association, the Monitor magazine, and the article was called Boosting Morale. And it went on to say in the heading, an unhappy workplace can increase depression and heart disease. Of course, we know not only unhappy workplaces, many would put it more bluntly, unhappy people. Unhappy people, they're not good company. They're often not very productive. And they have lost that connection with the good passion of life. And their emotional growth has been turned off. And when that happens, they begin to shrink in their engagement with the world, and they lose that important sense of well-being in life. You've often heard it said. A person walks up to another and said, "You used to be such a live wire. What's happened to you?" And the person is likely to say, "Well, that's what life does to you." Or I had one man say to me the other day, he was suffering from inner depletion. A rather highbrow way of telling me that he was rather impoverished inside. Some people, in spite of adverse experiences, can nevertheless keep alive their passion. They actively create positive life energy. And they're even able to expand on it in themselves and for others. I came across the other day this magazine which was discussing Manet's paintings. And I took down the book of Manet's paintings to endorse what was here being said. But this particular painting, you'll not be able to see it very well from here, but let me describe it to you. It's of a young woman, and he was very much into painting young women, but each of them had a vibrancy about them. And in this one particularly so. This man, Manet, was ill at the time, suffering from a dreadful disease, and in fact he was to die only a couple of months after he painted this extraordinary picture of this young woman. It's important that you see not only her black image, she's the horsewoman, a horse rider, and wearing a bell-topper black hat, black coat. And there she sits. And against that you've got this exuberant painting of her face. And there he was wanting to demonstrate that despite what was happening in life generally, he could put that kind of vibrancy, that excitement and strength and passion into her face. But not only so, it's important to see the background of the painting. The intense blue behind her places the context of that picture fully before us. So there it was. While his own inner life was being eaten away by disease, his passion was right in front of him, his gift to the world. Simone de Beauvoir once wrote, "Life is occupied in both perpetuating itself and surpassing itself. If all it does is maintain itself, then living is only not dying, and human existence becomes indistinguishable from absurd vegetation." So she was putting before us the idea of being more, surpassing itself. In many ways, the old faith that I talk about, the old faith of traditional Christian religion, frequently is staying within its own prescribed borders, keeping the belief systems there, and that's what it is. The new faith that I have advocated focuses on Jesus of Nazareth opening up new ways of being, presenting a faith of generosity, of expansiveness, of tolerance. and of that persistent search, not only for survival, but for that fuller expression of life and wholeness. I dare say many of you have had in your lifetime similar experiences as I had in my younger days. As in college, we all lined up to the kitchen servery for our lunch or our dinner, and we moved along. There was the meat, there were the vegetables, and then the gravy. And frequently we'd say, "More gravy." And we soon learned which of the servers behind the bench were likely to be generous with the gravy ladle and which were likely to be stingy. What do you do? What do you do if there's not enough gravy in your life? Sometimes you have to adapt to life without the gravy. But sometimes you can persist in your request for more gravy. And often the way we handle this kind of situation shows what kind of people we all will become. The receivers, the givers, the onlookers, the interested audiences, the participants. And there it was in that New Testament story I read today from St. Matthew chapter 15. The woman in the story wanted something that would change everything. Her request for her daughter was first ignored and then refused. And you notice the onlookers were impatient and intolerant, and they wanted to exclude her, but she persisted. She wanted some hope for her daughter's life. She wanted some healing for her daughter's life, and she kept focused on that better future. Now you might also notice that he did not ask her to sign up for a whole raft of beliefs. He said, your faith brings you into the energy of hope. Your faith brings you into the rational argument, away from the prejudices and the exclusions. Your faith is the energy of acceptance, the energy for a different future. And so he says, there you have it. You see, it is so easy to lose our connection with that persistence, with our faith energy, with our growth into the future. Instead, we lose contact with our emotional growth. We lose contact with the passion of life. And listen to what happens. We want more gravy, more gravy. And when we don't get what we want, we might throw a tantrum. Though we sometimes think, maybe we always think, that tantrums are only for children. Many adults, right into their later years, will show us how well they are practiced at the art of having tantrums. So that's one reaction. Or we refuse to adapt to any constructive way of handling the reality that that faces us. We lose sight of what is important, and we get lost in the squabbling and in the side issues. Or sometimes we lose our sense of self and we sell out. There's that interesting little story about the legend of the rabbit and the scorpion. They both came to the river wanting to cross. The scorpion asks the rabbit to give it a ride across the river, and the rabbit agrees. But when they reach the shore of the other side, the scorpion forthwith stings the rabbit. And as the rabbit is dying, it says to the scorpion, why did you do that? And the scorpion says, because it's my nature. Human beings are a little bit like that too. So the rabbit, in being ready to be helpful, inadvertently perhaps forfeited his self-protection. So in our emotional low growth, we may become so committed to doing certain things that we overlook ourselves and our own particular growth and self-protection. The woman in the New Testament story remained clear in what she needed and kept her sense of self well controlled, kept resiliently holding to what she saw was her reasonable request. Now we might then ask the important question: how is it that some of us were well on the road to ongoing growth, but we started to shrivel up? We became less generous. We became more resentful and cynical. We became less enjoyable people. We became more depressed. How is it that we lose that passion we once had, that excited, exuberant investment in something, in someone, and we settle for the shrinkage lane? Why do we do that? How is it that the conductor of a great orchestra can be so very passionate about the music, but in relationships he can be a repetitive disaster? So you see, something goes wrong. We all like to see people combining their emotional growth, their emotional enlargement, their emotional enjoyment with a good passion for life. A passion that gives real energy and focus to life. A passion that calls for generous energy. A passion that brings life to the individual and healing, constructive energy to the environment around them. But we need more than one passion. We know that life is a lesser experience without a passion, but in reality, we could do with more than one passion, because we've seen many instances where one passion has the tendency to be either a full obsession or somewhat of a boring conversation. I think we need more than one passion. Look for that. We all need to reconnect, therefore, with that emotional growth that can lead us in that direction. Wherever we are on the age spectrum, emotional life and growth needs to be high priority. And there are 100 ways to reconnect with that growth. We only need 3 or 4, and I'll add a couple more. Some of you, I know, have been part of my mood clinics, where I speak about mood boosters. Now, this particular article here, the Psychological Journal, she talked about boosting morale. I think mood boosters that seems to be a little bit more tangible to me. Mood boosters, they demonstrate that when we get into an emotional blocked state or a flat state, we recognize that we need a booster. And often we need to study, where are our boosters? How can I make contact with them? When we can get those boosters active, we begin to be lifted to a higher level of self-control and self-power. That's the first thing. A mood booster helps us to get reconnected. Second, we saw that the woman in the New Testament story was not beaten by her past experiences. She was not beaten by the surrounding environment of the naysayers. She was a little bit like the artist who kept alive the context, the environment behind here. So she wanted to keep that alive. She had her energy and her faith focused. It was her considered passion. And that's what a good passion is. It combines an emotional awareness with a focused investment, a focus in something or someone that lifts everything. And that's the second thing, a focused investment. Thirdly, reconnecting with your emotional growth requires disentangling yourself from your past negatives, eliminating or reducing the oppression of your negative thoughts and emotions, and cultivating authentic and expansive enjoyments and environments. It takes that particular active involvement to actually cultivate authentic environments. And then fourthly, we need to reconnect with our emotional growth by recognizing that growth is not only about leaving past milestones, but it's about creating new milestones. Time magazine recently had a profile of Renzo Piano, one of the world's most prolific architects. And in an interview he said, "There is something about giving everything to your profession." In Italian, an obsession is not necessarily negative, he said. It's the art of putting all your energy into one thing. It's the art of transforming even what you eat for lunch into architecture. It's a stubbornness, he said, but it's a kind of sublime stubbornness. Without it, you never get certain things in place. Of course, architecture is a very dangerous job. If a writer makes a bad book, people can easily throw the book on the heap. But if, as an architect, you make bad architecture, you impose ugliness on a place for 100 years. So we need to hear that story relating to our own lives, our own low emotional growth, our passionless life, often provide a similar legacy. Not for 100 years, but for the environment around us, for the next generation or two. We can leave a lot of ugliness instead of creating new, positive milestones for the future. In Kenneth Robinson's book, How Finding Your Passion Changes Everything, he gives the main title of the book, The Element, The Element. And I wonder for some time, what does he mean by the element? And you too might want the element. It means that a person is in his or her element when they are doing the thing they love. And in doing it, they feel life is more authentic and that they are more authentic. And he goes on to say, when people are in their element, they connect with something fundamental to their identity, something fundamental to their purpose and to their well-being. Many find in their element a real sense of awakening and growth. They're in their element. So we want to reconnect, don't we, with such energy and growth, that we feel that freedom to embrace the fullness of life that is still waiting for us. In another book I read about the desert in California, which is called Dead Valley. It is one of the hottest, driest places on earth. Nothing grows there. But then a couple of years ago, they had a huge downfall of rain, 7 inches in one downpour. And would you believe it? Death Valley suddenly sprang to life. There they were, all the flowers and bushes covering the entire valley. Death Valley was alive, fresh, with vibrant growth. But then, as time passed, the spring went, the flowers were gone. Perhaps rain might come again. But what happened showed us an important revelation. That Death Valley was not dead at all. It was somehow asleep. But an awakening could come. It was waiting for conditions of growth and new life. Perhaps we need to listen to that story as a parable. That sometimes we are like Death Valley, but given the right conditions, creating the right conditions, being open to the right conditions, the parable might speak loudly to us. Would you please stand?